To the sound. To the sound. To the sound. To the sound.
All right, welcome to another video on learning about atheism. And this is going to be specifically geared toward an epistemological situation I kind of ran into not too long ago, dealing with what we mean by justifications versus metaphysical accounting. When somebody's asking you why you believe, if you're an atheist, right, or even as a theist, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what the belief is. It really makes no difference. It applies equally to, I think, to all beliefs. But when somebody's asking you what you believe, they're asking you the reasons why you believe something. What are your justifications for it? What makes it you think that you have a sensible, reasonable, rational, even dare I say logical approach to why you came to the conclusion that you can came to. And so when you're having these discussions with Christians and theists, and even worse, presuppositional apologetics, when they say, well, okay, you're claiming that God does not exist. How do you justify it? And you give them solid reason justification. You can be like, look, I have an aggregate of arguments. I think the evidential theory, evidential problem evil is very hard to assail. You can argue the logical problem evil, divine hiddenness, appeal to theoretical virtues from Graham Boppy's approach, appeal to naturalism. There's many different reasons why you can make a claim that there is no God with I mean, not super minimal justifications, but sufficient justifications where you let people know if you want to explain it to them, you have no onus to, because again, epistemic justifications are your own beliefs that you have to justify to yourself. But if you have a persuasionary responsibility or justification to somebody else, if you want to convince them, that's different. But these are just justifications. These are for your reasons. Now they can attack that. They can say, look, the evidential problem evil, this theodicy kind of deals with that, Plantinga this or whatever, and work around that. But the reason how you got to your conclusion is still what you gave them the justifications for. Your job is done at that point. Don't get suckered in by dishonest precept that they say, well, you're not giving a full accounting for your justification, because that's what they're trying to go for. They're trying to ask for what's called a metaphysical accounting, which is not the same thing as an epistemic justification. An epistemic justification, again, is the reasons why you hold a particular belief. And it's not that hard to meet that burden of justification. And if some people want to call it burden of proof, that's fine as well, because they're in epistemology. I just see no distinguishment between a burden of proof and a burden of justification. They're just different ways of saying the same thing. Why do you believe what you believe? That's it. It doesn't mean to prove anything. If you claim there's no God, it doesn't mean you have to prove there's no God. That'd be insane. Absolutely insane. You can justify your beliefs by giving the reasons why you hold it. Now, if you say you're an atheist and you believe there's no God because God's impossible, you might have to have a little bit more justification. Why? Because impossibility requires a proof by impossibility. You have to explain why something is impossible if it's logically possible. Now, you can argue it's metaphysically impossible and it's not parsimonious to natural law. That's fair. But at least that's a reasoned approach to why to accept that there is no God. But merely saying that gods are impossible is not a justification. It's just another assertion. Because somebody could ask, well, what makes them impossible? Are you talking logically impossible, metaphysical impossible? But the problem is, if you just say it's metaphysically impossible, that's a given, I think. That's the whole reason why Christians say, look, I believe in Jesus because he's the risen Christ and he came back from the dead and he did all these miracles. That's what they're positing. They're already positing that these things are metaphysically impossible. That's why it's so amazing that Christ supposedly was able to do these things. They're not saying it's logically impossible. And when an atheist says that something like rising from the dead is logically impossible, they don't know logic, because it's not logically impossible. Logically impossible means there's a contradiction. There's nothing inherently a contradiction of Jesus rising from the dead. What's a contradiction is Jesus rising from the dead and not rising from the dead. That's a contradiction. So there's a big difference there. So when I see these Christians arguing, about somebody who's an atheist about, oh, you have no foundation for atheism, or atheism is irrational, what they're really trying to dishonestly say is that, oh, you have no metaphysical accounting for your position. And what they mean by that is a first cause or causal chain of how did you get from this step to this step deductively to where you have some initial condition that explains everything, the entire universe. And that's not what we're asking for when we ask, why do you believe what you believe? If I say, let's say like I come home and there's a pizza box on the table with pizza in it. And I say, hey, I believe there's a pizza box there. Well, I'm just random stuff, but why am I justified for that? Oh, I spelled justifications wrong. I got to fix that. I'll fix that on the thumb. But why is it that I believe that? Well, I have an experience of an object that semantically I call a pizza box that I see. So my justification is a causal relationship between what I'm observing and my mind processing in it to tell me that I see a pizza box. So I am justified in my belief there's a pizza box there by a causal theory of knowledge or justification. That's a causal relationship there, right? Something there is causing me to believe this. It's an external justification, but it's still a form of justification. You don't need an internalist approach. I know, like David Pullman, I guess he's, really smart guy, but I guess he's really an internalism to justify things. And that's perfectly fine. You can justify things internally too, but there's nothing wrong with appealing to external justifications. So my external justification is something in the real world exists that's caused me to believe this. Now, of course, people can say, well, what if you're hallucinating? And you can get into this radical skepticism. But we have ways of testing these things. How often have I seen a hallucination of a pizza box on my table? How often have other people seen this common thing? Do I have reasons to doubt my faculties? Do I have reasons to doubt my decision-making abilities, my reason-formed of argumentation of why do I believe what I believe? Do I have reason to doubt these things? Do I believe that my memory is faulty? If these things are all such that you have no reason to doubt these things, then you really have no reason to doubt your belief that there's a pizza box. It's a mundane thing we've seen before. So you're justified to have that belief. Now, if they ask, well, what is your metaphysical accounting of how the pizza box got there? That's an entirely different question, because they'll say, well, you're not justified to believe it because you have no accounting for it, which is irrelevant to the justification. But they're really asking for is, what's the cause? How that pizza box got there? Well, there's different meanings of the word cause for causality. Aristotle has 4 causes. He has material cause, formal cause, efficient cause, and a final cause. And what he means by this is, what's the reason why the pizza box is there? Well, there's a pizza box that has a physical object, a physical manifestation that's made of cardboard, that's in a configuration that we call pizza box. That's why that's there, because there's something there made out of material of an object that exists. That's a pizza box. Okay, but what's another cause? Well, there's a pizza box there because how to get there? Well, my roommate brought it home and put it on the table. Right? That's a formal cause. Assuming that's a efficient cause. That'd be, why is there a pizza box on the table? Because they're always asking why, how, right? So they're asking for metaphysical accounting is, why is there a pizza box there? Well, because the pizza box there because of material cause, because this is an object that we know from prior experience that we called pizza box, right? This is the pizza box theory of metaphysical accounting. Or they're asking how to get there. How do you, well, the causation of it getting there is my roommate would brought it home. Or the formal cause, which is the actual form itself of the box is such that it is a pizza box. It's the form, not just the materials that make it, but the actual form in the shape of a pizza box by function. What is that function? To hold pizza. So the functionality of the form of a pizza box is to what? hold pizza. So that's what they're asking for, is an accounting of why is there a pizza box there? Or the final cause is, what's the purpose of the pizza box? To hold pizza. So if the pizza box has a teleos to hold pizza, and it has a pizza, or whether it does or doesn't, doesn't matter. It has the ability to hold pizza, because that's the teleos of the function of the final cause, then it's a pizza box. And therefore I'm able to say there's a pizza box there and formulate my beliefs on that. But I don't need that to justify my belief. I don't need to have any type of metaphysical accounting of forms of what it means to be a pizza box there. What I have to do is say, why do I believe that? I believe that because there's a causal relationship between the object that exists in the world and my sense perception of that object. That's my justification. Now they can attack it if they want. Okay, well, maybe it's hallucination. Okay, but do you have any reason to believe it's hallucination? Do you not trust your faculties? Do you not trust your decision-making capabilities? Are you going to give me a reason why I should doubt that's a cardboard box? If you don't, then you're just appealing to radical skepticism. You're just appealing to precept argumentation, that you can't know anything without knowing God. But of course, as the skeptic, you can clearly reason. You can clearly formulate things without having a deity to do that. Now, Van Til will argue that atheists can reason, or non-believers can reason, because it's a non-belief channel, not an atheist channel, but a non-believer helping atheist. But he'll argue that atheists can reason, but they're inconsistent in their system, because they are trying to reason without some kind of infinite regression to a prime entity, prime mover, prime entity of all causality and all knowledge. That is the axiomatic grounding of all things. When they call that the Christian God, and they say you cannot have a coherent system without the Christian God. You can reason, but it's not coherent. It's not consistent, I can say. Well, no, I don't think it's coherent is a better word. And it's basically the atheist is supposedly having a contradiction by applying reason without having the ultimate reason for everything as the fundamental basis for it. But of course, one, you don't need that fundamental reason. Two, what happens if you do take it? What happens if I do have the fundamentals that God is the ultimate cause, which I will say is not a cause of anything. I do accept that. I know it's a trope, and I know a lot of atheists throw that out there, that if God exists, he doesn't explain anything. But it is true. That much I do believe. I really hate conceding to bad, simple tropes, but it's a true argument. There's nothing that's gained by positing a God except more axioms, which is not parsimonious. It goes against Occam's razors, right? And Occam's razors, basically, if you have two competing hypotheses with the same explanatory power, you choose the ones with less entities, meaning the ones with less axioms. Now, that's not a steadfast law, but it's a rule of thumb. And it's a good rule of thumb. You don't want to posit epicycles for planetary formation when orbits or elliptical orbits can explain it just fine. And the math is a heck of a lot easier. You don't want to explain kinematics of a ball trajectory from a baseball using elliptical formulas. You just want to use simple equations, kinematic equations, parabolic equations. Could you use elliptical equations? Yes, but it's a lot more complicated to get the same answer. It's not parsimonious to do so. You could use relativity and all this stuff for kinematics, but it's more complicated. If you're not in a gravitational field of any consequence, or if you're not traveling in the speed of light, those things don't matter. You're going to come up with the same general answer. So if I want to use a law of logic, what does it gain? What do I gain as a non-believer by positing God? Now, the preceptor just says, well, you gain a full accounting. Well, that doesn't matter to my justification, though. And this is where the dishonesty comes into play. Their metaphysical accounting, whether you agree with it or not, may be consistent. I'm not going to argue otherwise. It's internal to their critique, their critique to their argument. But it's externally, it's non-parsimonious, and it doesn't add anything. Matter of fact, it probably makes the problem even worse, because God's not explaining anything. Did God explain how a cardboard box, a pizza box, got on my table? No. I mean, you could argue it's the efficient cause, and that's what they do. God is the final cause of anything. But I never saw how God did that. I know how a human being could buy a pizza, bring it to home and put it on the table. I know how that can happen. And you can have metaphysical accountings for that too. The physics involved in that, the walking, right? That all in, where do the physics come from? Where do the laws of physics come from? Where do the nomological laws come from? There's always some kind of metaphysical accounting that goes all the way back in this infinite regression. And to be justified, you just have to appeal to what is it that we know based upon our coherentism web of beliefs, if you're a coherentist, that jives with other beliefs. Well, I know I've seen people do this. I have never seen a God produce a pizza box and put it on my table. So what is the most parsimonious, likely explanation for something? That I come home and I find a pizza on my table, that is my roommate that gave it to me. It could be wrong, could be a neighbor, right? Could be an alien, who knows, but could be just magic. But the most likely parsimonious explanation would be my roommate brought it home. That's a solid justification. Doesn't have to be right, but it's a justification. When have we ever seen God do anything? And how is it explained? If God created everything, how did he do that? And just saying that he just spoke it into existence is not a causal mechanism. Because the presuppositionalist, the Christian, is asking for a causal relationship. Here's the box, here's the physics, here's the, how it got there from the person who has to abide by natural law. They'll go over there, buy it, walk over, kinematics, physics, whatever. There's a causal relationship. But there's no causality that gets you all the way back to God, because nobody knows how God did anything. They have stipulations of how God did it. In fact, everything people know about God is stipulated. It is literally told to people, by people, about God. Nobody has ever wandered off and said, I'm going to go, see if I can find some properties of God. Why? Because you can't hold God in your hand and go, look, here's a God, here's his properties. You can't do it. Nobody's ever done this. I don't think Christians have ever argued that anybody's ever done this. So you can't just observe a God and say, here are the properties. What it is somebody's going to say, this is what I think about God. And then that gets somehow translated into, this is the facts about God. But these are all stipulated facts. Every single one of them. And so by positing this God that explains why this pizza box got on my table, what is it explaining though? If I want to ask the question, why is there a pizza box on my table, and I'm satisfied that my roommate did it, that's fine. But there's also another question to be asked. Why did she bring home the cart or the pizza? Right? There's another why question, which is more along the lines of metaphysical accountings. Why did she bring it home? Did she buy it for me? Did she buy it to have a party? Did she buy it for herself? Was she hungry? These are other questions to be answered. Right? But who the heck knows? Now, I can be justified to say, well, if she left it on the table and it's open for, she bought it for both of us. And we know we just share food. And by the way, my roommate didn't buy a pizza. I'm the one that bought the pizza, but the other day, but it's okay. The point is the same. It's just it's a hypothetical. But the questions are, why is there a pizza box? What's the ultimate reason for this? And that would involve the reasoning by which the pizza box was bought. But if I just say God got the pizza and put it there, why? Why did God do this? Well, how did he do it? This is why positing God does not explain any causal relationships. There's no direct cause. What they're trying to do is relate a physical causation of the prime mover, the first cause that put things into motion. But if God can voluntarily at any time by his own volition break the causal chain by doing what he wants by some kind of miracle, which is, I hate to say defined by, because it's not, it's descriptive, but basically we understand a miracle in the sense that it violates natural law, something that God has done that is in violation of a natural law. And if God can do that, then there is no causality anymore. There is no causal relationship, because the laws of nature have been suspended and changed. So when you have these precept argumentations out there, and these preceptors out there, and Christians are arguing to the atheist, what is your justifications for your belief? Don't confuse it with a metaphysical accounting. They're not asking you why you believe in a causal relationship. What they're asking you is, that's what they're trying to ask you. But really what we mean by justification is, why do you believe what you believe? What's your reasoning for it? Reasoning is not the same as causality there. And some Christians do it accidentally, and I probably believe most of them do. But some of them, I think, deliberately, maybe they're not conscious of it, but they are deliberately equivocating the belief justification with the metaphysical accounting. And they're not the same thing. Anyways, I got some people out there. I didn't mean to ignore you guys out there. Hey, Dan. Hey, Chemo. Dan says, quick question about the contradictions. Can God die? If not, how can he rise from the dead? That's a fair question, or is it semantics? No, the whole thing with Jesus being a part of the Godhead and the Trinity, it got so convoluted after the Nicene Creed, from what I understand, that they formulated what's called Mysterianism, which is basically, we don't know, right? The Christians did like, we have no idea. I mean, think about it. Everything about the Trinity got shot down. Molinism, monism, Sabellitism, every type of Trinity concept was all considered to be heresy by all the churches, or at least the Catholic Church. And so it doesn't make any sense, right? The Trinity makes no sense. I've never, ever believed in the Trinity, ever, even when I was a theist. And nowhere does it say that Trinity is necessary for salvation. That came on later with the Nicene Creed, as I understand it. But how Jesus died is basically his physical part of died, and then God the Father existed, So Jesus was a manifestation in physical form. That physical form died, but his spirit, so to speak, which was God or part of God, depending on what flavor you want, rose on. Now, the thing is, like God the Father, it would make no sense that God the Father could die to a Christian, right? Because they're positing God as a necessary being that must exist in all possible worlds. He cannot not exist. And that's fine for consistency for their beliefs. There's not special pleading. I really hate when an externalist looks in and says, oh, that's special pleading. And it's not. It really isn't. If they were to say everything has a cause, everything that has a cause has a causation, therefore anything that exists that has a cause must have a cause, some other causation, then yeah, there might be special pleading, because then God would have to have cause because he exists. But they don't word it that way anymore. Maybe at one time they did. But if they just say God is a necessary being that is a causal, meaning without cause, there's no special pleading there. They're not trying to say he's an exemption from other things. What they're saying is he's a special being called necessary being, and they can argue for it, and they do that. So it's not special pleading. They argue why God is a necessary being, and that's sufficient, because special pleading means that you have no argument to justify why you make something exempt, right? But they're not even really making anything exempt. They're not. They would make it exempt as everything has a cause. God is caused, but he has no causation. That's kind of a more special pleading, because they're not positing him as something that was ever caused. Would be acausal. We got Willie Mays fan out there. Hey, Willie, still a Christian, man? I hope you're getting something out of this as well, because I don't think you're a preceptor, but I know you're a creationist. But I hope you get something out of these things too. These things that I do to help atheists, I think equally help theists. And modalism, yeah, thank you, Kawasa. Modalism, because there's monism, monism, modalism, and what's the other one? Monism, or whatever. But modism, monalism, whatever. But yeah, it's modalism. So basically, modalism would be equivalent to saying water can be steam, water, liquid form, or ice, solid. And so there are three phases of the same substance, but that was, I guess, heresy to the church, right? And so that view of modalism, or I think Sabellianism is pretty much the same thing, that view of the Trinity didn't work. So they just came up with the Mysterianism. It's too mysterious for us. But I don't know why belief in the Trinity would be a salvation issue. Why would God care if you got something like that wrong? If everyone on the planet can't even understand the Trinity and you don't accept it, why would God be mad about that? He'd be like, yeah, man, it's a really difficult concept. I made the human mind limited in his capacity. And so I would expect him not to really understand that. That shouldn't be a salvational issue. It makes no sense. But anyways, going back to the metaphysical accounting and justification. So people, also ask, how do you justify things? And there's theories of justification out there to do this. They can appeal to. These are, again, external theories. One, again, the direct causal relationship, the causal theories of knowledge. The other ones are the justified true belief theories of knowledge. JTP or JTP plus, which is basically adding in a different condition, or a newer condition, a fourth condition that has to do with truth tracking and possible world theory. But you're still appealing to when somebody says, well, how do you know this? And preceptors love that, right? How do you know that? Well, I know it because the proposition is true. I believe it's true, and I'm justified to believe it's true. Justified true belief. How do you know it? Proposition is true. I believe it's true, and I have a causal relationship in causal theory. That's how I know it. Either one of those can be appealed to. I like both. I can use justified true belief or causal. I think they both are fine. They both are susceptible to Gettier problems, but that's neither here nor there. People understand there's Gettier problems. It's if there's epistemic luck. But, I don't think I have a fake cardboard box pizza there, I like the fake barn situation, if you're familiar with that. But that's the theory of justification. So when somebody says, well, how are you justified? And they'll say, well, how do you know what's true? Well, because I have a theory of truth out there. The correspondence theory is truth. That's when the Aaron Ra statement it comports with reality. He doesn't justify it very well, but what he means by this is not a justification for our knowledge or belief. It's a justification of what makes something true. That there's a object out there that is called the truth maker that makes the proposition, there's a pizza box on my table, true. Could you be wrong on that? Yeah. So what? None of these theories are perfect. They're not meant to be certainties. This is where I think the precept and dishonest Christians try to manipulate the atheist and the non-believer. They're trying to go for certainty that nobody's ever claiming. You do not have to claim certainty for belief. You do not have to claim certainty for knowledge. There's only a few handful of people that want to relate certainty to knowledge. Very few philosophers do anymore. But overall, in the literature, when I read it, knowledge does not require certainty. There's two belief case conditions, really. There's the belief case of knowledge where you have to have certainty, where certainty implies knowledge. And there's the weak case of acceptance where certainty does not imply knowledge does not apply certainty, but knowledge is a subset of belief. Knowledge implies belief. That's the weak acceptance case. And I think that's the most prevalent, bar none. None of us use knowledge as certainty, really. When you say, I know this, you're not telling the person you're certain of it. It's not even how we even use the word. You're telling them that there's reasons for you to elevate it from mere belief to why you believe it's a knowledge position. And how do you do that? By appealing to a theory of knowledge. Now, most people don't do that, right? They don't know the theories of knowledge. But philosophers do understand theories of knowledge. And they can say, well, it's true. What makes it true is the truth maker. I believe it's true because that's my epistemic disposition. And I'm justified to believe it because some kind of theory of justification. Knowledge. Now, could you be wrong in your claim of knowledge? Yes. But you cannot be wrong about the knowledge. If you have knowledge, you are correct. You cannot have false knowledge. And I wrote an essay on this on my blog, and you can go Google it, called The Principle of Attribution and Retraction. And it was just a way of a long time ago, Ozymandias kind of put that in a way of explaining it, and I loved it, and I ran with it, and I totally give him full credit for it. I love that. The Principle of Attribution and Retraction. But it basically is that if you have a false belief and the belief turns out to be wrong, you still had a false belief. You were wrong about your belief. The belief was false. You didn't change your belief back then. You changed it later, but your belief at the time was wrong. It was false belief. But if I claimed a knowledge and I find out that it was wrong, I don't say I had false knowledge. What I do is I retract the claim of having knowledge. I can't have false knowledge because knowledge must be true because of justified true belief. The proposition has to be true. Or in the causal theory of knowledge, the causation mechanism, reliable causation mechanism that the object exists has to be true. So what I would do is say, look, I was wrong. I thought I had knowledge, but I don't. Same thing with a mathematical proof. You cannot have a false mathematical proof. Because if it's false, it's not a proof. Proofs must be true, or they're not a proof. So if somebody says, well, I submitted this proof and later on they found an error in it, okay, but then it was never proven to begin with. You had a false claim that it was proven. And so you retract that claim. You retract that paper, right? You have a mathematical paper that's a proof and has an error in it, you retract the paper. You don't say that you had a false, you don't say that the proof, you don't say that I had a proof that proved it and then later it changed. What you say is I never had a proof to begin with because the proof was never correct. That's the attribution and retraction. You attribute something, but then you retract it if you find out you're wrong. But we don't do that with beliefs. I believe that I have a proof, and if the proof turns out to be false, I still had a false belief. That's the difference. Dan says, is there an argument against infinite regress to questions like, why do you believe the universal existed before time, or why do you believe God is eternal? Okay, first of all, infinite regress is not a logical problem. It's actually part of the Munchausen trilemma, that there's only certain things that you can have. You can have a brute fact, which is a contingent thing that from all contingent things flow. You have a necessary being from which all contingent things flow, and necessary wouldn't, but contingent would. Or you have an infinite regress. So the problem with infinite regress is more of an epistemic issue. Because there's something called the dilemma of inferential justification that says if you justify X and X is dependent on Y, then you need a justification for Y. And if Y is dependent on Z, you need a justification for Z. So you have all these dependencies of justifications. But of course, we don't think like that when we're just trying to justify our actions for something. We don't have to have an infinite or even a remotely causal chain of justifications to explain to somebody why that you believe that you believe. Because you're just spending all day explaining why you believe something. And it's not practical. But infinite regression itself, as far as time, there's nothing against that in physics or math that I know of. That I don't know anything that says infinite regress is impossible. But when they say, why do you believe the universe existed for a time? What they're asking for is metatime in some metaverse. Because if the universe is cyclical, such that before the Big Bang, which is not, it doesn't make any sense to say before Big Bang, because time didn't exist in this universe to have it before. But there could have been other universes which had different time, or even where the time's arrow is reverse. Time flows from low entropy to high entropy here. So they call that the arrow of time. And the way we notice the passages of time is because of dissimilarities between different parts of space. So if we see two particles moving away from each other, we know there's time. We know something's happening because there's a displacement there. If all the particles, every fundamental particle in the universe froze in place, every single one of them, would there be time? And it depends on your philosophical view. There's the Platonic realist version of time, and then there's the reductionist view of time. The reductionist view of time says that if all motion stopped, there is no change in the universe, there is no time, because time is just an illusion of passages between events. The Platonic realist in that form, or the Platonic realism with respect to time, would say, no, time's still going. You're just not noticing anything. There's still in the container of the universe, there's still time passing. It is a fabric of space-time. It is an integral part of the universe. Just nothing is happening, but there's still time passing. And I do tend to more of a Platonic realist approach on time. I do think that is more than just us observing displacement of objects for time. So, but again, philosophical approach. So when they're talking about before time, they're really talking about some other universe that existed. God in some temporal state that somehow produced the world and the universe. But there is some problems with this, right? There is when you're dealing with theories of time, because you have to have a certain point in time for an infinite being to create something in a finite time, which is very difficult to wrap your head around or even be possible, right? And then and there's something called the Grim Reaper paradox that talks about this. And I know that it was Alexander Pruss, Dr. Pruss, I think, wasn't it? Or no, it was Malpass. I'm sorry. It's Dr. Alex Malpass. And he wrote with an online guy. Who was it? Oh my goodness. Was it Emerson Green? Somebody pressed my memory. Who did? But somebody. No. Majesty of Reason, wasn't it? Who wrote a paper, and wrote something with Dr. Malpass on the Grim Reaper paradox. I haven't read it. I probably won't understand it, but yeah, it's very difficult to try to understand how an infinite being that is acausally connected and spatio-temporally isolated can create something like the universe. It is very difficult. And then say, why do you believe it's eternal? And the reason for why certain Christians believe that God is eternal is because there's only a handful of possibilities of the universe. One of which is it is a necessary being in and to itself. That the universe must exist. There always must be something. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I have no idea. I really don't. It's so profoundly fundamental that it's just the bedrock of what would mean to have a real type of metaphysical accounting, and we just don't know. Everybody's guessing on it. Could there be a metaphysical being that exists? Yeah. Well, I think there are metaphysical beings that must exist. Yes, absolutely. Law of identity, law of non-contradiction, law of excluded middle, double negation rule, De Morgan's rules. These are all laws of physics, classical laws of physics, right? So there's the canonical classical laws, which are the three ones, and then there's other laws of logic afterwards. There's like I said, double negation is a law of logic, and so when they're positing this being, they're positing it as a being that must exist as a necessary being, and then they can give arguments for that. And if it is a necessary being, it's because it can be no other way. The ultimate metaphysical accounting, some being with intentional states, is the necessary being that must exist for everything else to exist. And that is coherent in their framework. This is what I'm saying. If you're an atheist, you're not just saying, well, that's stupid. You're not really philosophizing. You're not really deep thinker, because what they're saying is absolutely possible. Is it that way it is? Well, I believe no, right? Because I'm agnostic. I don't believe that God is the ultimate accounting for something. But is there anything logically impossible with that? Absolutely not. It's totally logically possible. It's metaphysically possible, because it's only going to be so many different ways. But I don't understand the necessity to posit intentionality to have a medical, physical, necessary being if the universe is necessary. If the universe is contingent, then it would have to be because some being, something caused it to exist. Some necessary being caused it to exist, or a brute fact. There's really only two possible things. If it's not an infinite regress, it's either a contingent or a necessary being that made it come into being. If it's a necessary being, it could be quantum fluctuations, sure, but why is there quantum fluctuations? That metaphysical accounting is something that the atheist has to deal with. That is true. Why is there, they can say it's brute fact. Okay, I get that. Sometimes it's impossible to explain. We might have mental limitations and epistemic limitations, and we'll just say, look, it's a brute fact. These things exist. But science hates brute facts like that, right? They want to know what is quantum fluctuations. But generally in science, I think they probably agree that the universe has to have quantum fluctuations. And that this universe came out of a quantum fluctuation. There's a paper on that. And mathematically, it works. It works. It could happen, which is pretty impressive. Because if it couldn't work that way, then there's nothing to it. But they've literally shown it could happen that way. From a quantum fluctuation, you can create the universe. They've shown this mathematically, which is pretty good indication that's probably what it was. Because if it was impossible, they couldn't show it mathematically, clearly. And it's a natural explanation. If they said, hey, the universe came from farting rainbows, unicorns farting rainbows or whatever, farting unicorns in the universes or whatever, that's going to be a little more difficult to prove. Or if they say even, a proton decayed and here's the universe. Well, that's not going to work, right? It has to come from a quantum fluctuation because of the metastable false vacuum. That works. It works. But why is there a metastable false vacuum? That again, that's the ultimate question. And so the question of a God being a necessary being is this positing something that must exist, but it has the intentionality to make that happen. But we've shown that it can happen without intentional states. By pure random occurrences, a quantum fluctuation can develop into a universe acausally. Whether that's right or wrong is not the question. What is the question is, can it happen? And it has been shown mathematically it can happen. Now, somebody could actually argue, well, sure, the universe came from a quantum fluctuation, but God did that. God made that quantum fluctuation create that universe. Okay, but do I need that axiom? Is it going to help me do science? Is it going to help me learn about reality? No, it doesn't explain anything. Why did God pick that particular quantum fluctuation to produce the universe? If you're going to ask for a ultimate metaphysical accounting, then why did God create that particular quantum fluctuation in this quantum foam to create the universe? Who knows? And in the possible world semantics, it would be, why did God actualize this particular world when He could have created the world any way He wanted? Because if not, then you lose, God's omnipotence and aseity and all those other things about him not beholden to anything else. If he had to create the world this way, there has to be a reason for that. Again, the metaphysical accounting. Why did He have to create the world specifically this way? because God's never told anybody why he had to create the world specifically this way. I mean, people have hypotheses for that, but it's again stipulated. But still, why? Why this particular universe? Why is this particular universe actualized and not some other universe where there's a myopic difference? The lone ammonia molecule question. If there's a lone molecule on a ring of Saturn somewhere, and that's the only difference between this universe and a different possible universe, why would it make a difference to us? That one lone ammonia atom in that ring around Saturn makes it a different world than we live in. It's a different possible counterfactual world. So why didn't God create that one? Who knows? And I'm telling you, Christians don't have an answer to this either. People can look in the literature. I certainly don't see it. I mean, sure, people can try, but I mean, I don't see any reasonable explanation why God had to create this actualized world rather than any other. Because you can't just refer to, well, it's God's will, or God wanted it that way. But why did he want it this way? What is it about that one lone ammonia atom in Saturn's rings that made it any different whatsoever? Because we're not even going to notice it. It has no effect on us. Now, people can argue, well, gravity is infinite. Yeah, but gravity is so infinitesimal, it's not going to have any factor to us whatsoever. You know, you can put the atom outside our Hubble sphere. How's it going to affect us? Gravity doesn't ever reach us. In fact, why did God create a universe outside of a Hubble volume? And what the Hubble volume is we're here, we can only see 13.9 billion miles, billion light years in either direction, right? So if you're, let me go to the camera. So if you're here, any direction you can go, you can only see 13.9 billion years ago. And it's a little less than that, 13.7, in that range. And that's where the James Webb's telescope is trying to look, in that range of light that was produced, only a couple hundred millions of years after the Big Bang singularity expanded through inflation. It's trying to look in that region of light. But all around us is the 360-degree bubble, a sphere. And that sphere is called the Hubble's volume. And so we will only observe anything inside of that. We'll never observe anything outside of that. Why? Because light will never reach us, because the universe is expanding. And so it's always moving further away from us. And so light will never reach us. It'll try, but it can't. It's forever outside of our vision or experience. Not even time can affect us from that area. So why did God produce it? Why would there something be past that? If it has no effect on us in any way, shape, or form, that gravity and everything else is never going to affect us. It is isolated from us because gravity has to travel at the speed of light, right? So if you can't travel faster than the speed of light and the universe is expanding and that light's never going to reach us, why make that universe? Because we hypothesize the universe is much bigger than what we can observe, but we can never know that because it's. Or why have these multiverses that are completely different from us, right? Now, that's a theory, and I get that. Multiverse is a theory. It's not a confirmed model. But it is a confirmed model that we have a Hubble's volume. That is confirmed. We know this, and they call that a level 1 multiverse. Now, some people may argue, we don't like the multiverse, and so... But I argue that level 1... I personally think that a level 1 multiverse is demonstrated. Because what they mean by it is, we're in our little verse, and then anything else of that is beyond that. But when they talk about multiverse in this level 2, is a spatially isolated universe that is outside of our universe, is completely independent of our universe. Now, there's some arguments that could be influenced each other, and they're called dark flow, but that's, again, hypothetical. But really, there's no causal relationship between those two universes. But why did God create those? And a level 3 multiverse is even more complicated than that. But we do know that the universe has this Hubble volume. Now, the Christian go, well, you know what? Nothing exists past the Hubble's volume as far as we can go. God has created that. Okay. But then it's a complete violation of laws of physics. You're basically saying that God just pooped on the laws of physics and said, I'm going to create this, but you know what? I'm not going to even have the laws of physics apply after that Hubble's volume. Okay, but then you're kind of being a dishonest deity. You're kind of like, making us appear something and making us learn about the laws of nature, and yet you're just saying those no laws of nature don't even apply because reasons. Let's see here. TomTom34 just woke up. Sorry. Welcome, TomTom34, man. I like the fact that I'm doing these streams later at night, and it seems to be more conducive to your time, TomTom, because I like having you around. Willie Mays fan, Steve, you're incredibly intelligent, and I have to work in the morning. Oh, sweet. Thank you, Willie Mays. Go to work, but come back and watch it later. And give me some theists, man. I need some theists to start joining me. Dan says, thanks, but now I even have more stuff to think and read about. That's the whole point of these things, man, to experience things you may not have heard about, right? Like, I doubt a lot of people have heard of the causal theory of knowledge, unless you've read Stanford Encyclopedia and read the tripartite theory of analysis of knowledge, which most of us have many times, could quote it a lot, but it's in there too. Tomdo says, one could argue that the multiverse are causally connected. It's basically not true. Spooky action at a distance. Yes, I agree. And unfortunately, we have to accept spooky action at a distance. I think local realism is dead. I think that locality is violated. I think realism is violated. I think that things happen at a distance, but there's no real component to it. How? I have no idea. If I did, I would probably revolutionize quantum mechanics. You know, but yeah, they don't know. It just does. But that's the wondrous thing about science. Science describes and science looks and it says, okay, here's what we're observing. Let's come up with an explanation for it. An accounting, right? Science isn't interested in justifications. The science isn't interested in accountings for why is this? You know, and you only have to explain so much until you get into the realm that science can no longer deal with. And that's where metaphysics comes in. In metaphysics, it's asking for a metaphysical accounting, not a nomological accounting. Although nomologics can be factored into metaphysics. And it's so funny because I got into discussing the other day, like with somebody who didn't understand that physical objects fall under metaphysics. They're like, no, metaphysics is the abstract and it doesn't have anything to do with physical. Really? Ontology is the study of things that exist, that have being, that take up time and space. Ontology is being. And so if something has being, it has mass, and it's ontological, it falls under metaphysics. But the metaphysics is, why does this thing have ontological presence, really? You know? What makes it, what makes something it is? The whole, even Kant's whole, the thing in itself, the noumenon, is metaphysics. Because you have phenomenon and you have noumenon, right? And so the phenomenon is the experience that we're seeing by observing something, the pizza box. But the noumenon is the pizza box itself. That's metaphysics. How is it not metaphysics? That's Kantian metaphysics. But I don't even know how anyone can think that materialism is not a form of metaphysics. Of course it is. Matter is a form of metaphysics. But yeah, it also goes in like Thomas Nagel's "What Is Be to Bat." I mean, I've read that, and it's just like he's explaining that we can never imagine what it's like to be the noumenon, the bat itself. We cannot imagine what it's like to be a bat. We can only think that we can. We are not bats, therefore we can never experience what a bat experience. I don't know what it's like to be a cardboard box pizza box. Because why? Because I've never been a cardboard pizza box. The only thing I can say, the thing in itself, is that me, my entity, myself, you know, but nobody else can experience that. You can't experience the noumenon. You can only experience the phenomenon. Tom says, Akiva says, I'm in the same boat. Dan, now I'm kind of obsessed with Pruss Kroons and the Grim Reaper idea. Yeah, it's fascinating. Pruss is a genius. I mean, I'm telling you, and yes, he's a Christian, but Alexander Pruss is probably one of the great philosophers of our time. Don't have to agree with him, but dude, that dude is just, him and Oppie, man. I mean, and Oppie is the atheist version of Pruss. Both of them are just absolutely mind-blowingly smart. And, you know, I'm grateful that I got to know, Dr. Rasmussen, who wrote a book with Pruss. And Rasmussen is smart as can be too. Jonathan Rasmussen. And then he says, evidently Graham Oppie has an opinion on this too. Yes, Graham Oppie has talked about the Grim Reaper paradox. I don't know how to fall on it, to be honest with you. Grim Reaper paradox, I do understand. I don't think I really want to relate it right now because I don't think I do it justice, but I do understand the Grim Reaper paradox. But I don't have a solution for it. I know Kroon came up with a solution, but some have argued that Kroon's solution doesn't work. And I think it was Oppie that did that. And again, the paper that Malpass and was it Majestic Majesty of Reason? wrote on that addresses that very thing. They don't think Kroon's objection, if I'm not mistaken, really addresses the problem with the Grim Reaper paradox. But it's been a long time since I've looked at that problem. Tom says, and I agree as well. Level 1 multiverse is pretty much established. Yep. Through the Hubble sphere. Yep. That planet that just right now moves away from us is outside our sphere. Next moment doesn't stop to exist. Guess no. Yeah, exactly. Once that object moves past that point of no return, it's outside of our dominion. It's gone. We can never get information from it again. It is essentially the same as if an object goes into a black hole, only you don't get the object destroyed, right? It's exactly the same thing. This is why people have argued, it's going to blow your mind, but this is why some people argue that we live inside a black hole. Because to an outside observer, right? If you think about it, our universe, if it is enclosed, no information can ever get to them about us, right? So if we lived in a black hole, they would never be able to see inside of that black hole, and the black hole would never be able to see outward. They're causally unrelated. And so people have hypothesized, yeah, we might be living in a black hole. Now, I think it's a little far-fetched, but I get the reasoning for it. And it's not like it's impossible, but it's just, there's issues with it. But the reasoning is that information will never cross that Hubble volume boundary condition. And even more so, there's something called the holographic principle. And the holographic principle states that all the information in the universe is encoded on a two-dimensional membrane, and membrane, it's not a real membrane, but two-dimensional membrane of the Hubble sphere. So if everything in the universe, all the information in the universe, which is three-dimensional, can be encoded on that two-dimensional Hubble sphere, we're essentially in the side of a black hole in that regard, because nothing's ever passed that membrane, information-wise, because it's outside of our limit. And so the reason they get that from is where if you have a two-dimensional hologram and you shine a laser through it, it produces a three-dimensional object. And so it's analogous to that. If you could shine a laser through the Hubble's volume, it would produce us. Only we don't need a laser to do it. Maybe there's something else that's shining through it. But the conceptualization is very similar. There's a two-dimensional hologram of information, and that information is how it gets to three-dimensional objects. It's called the holographic principle. And I think it's pretty legit. I don't know too many scientists that deny the holographic principle because it just works out, and it comes out of black hole theory. Now, when something enters the event horizon of a black hole, it gets into a highly entropic state. The information gets scrambled, but the information is never lost. It's encoded on the event horizon of the black hole in a very high entropic state. This is what produces heat. That very active encoding, it produces heat. Information produces heat. This was the big paradox called the firewall paradox that Stephen Hawking and Leonard Susskind got in an argument with. And Susskind won. Hawking lost. Hawking said that information is destroyed, and Susskind said, no, it's not destroyed. But both models seem to work. In one model, you pass right through, and you're fine. The other model, you're burning up because of this heat that's produced because of the encoding of the information on the event horizon of the black hole. And by the way, the surface area of the object is the max amount of quantity of information you can hold. That's another thing that came out of black hole theory. So there's a paradox here. Does the object burn up, or does it actually survive the trip? Because you don't know. Because you can never tell somebody, hey, I made it. You know? And the way this is resolved, and this is going to blow your mind if you've never heard this before, but the way this is resolved is that both happen. To the outside observer, you blow up and you're dead. To the person inside the black hole, once you pass the event horizon, you're fine. In a in a very, very big black hole. In a small one, you're going to be spaghettified because of gravitational forces. But in a big, big black hole, you're going to pass through the event horizon just fine. You wouldn't even notice it. But you'd be like, at some point, you're like, oh, shit, I ain't getting home. Right? You'd have to go back. You'd have to go the speed of light to go back out of the black hole. And you can't do that. You have to go faster than the speed of light. Because at the point of no return on the event horizon of the black hole, all directions point to the singularity. No matter what direction you go, you're heading toward the center, period. Space is so warped that every direction you go, you're going to be going to the center of the black hole. So there's no out. There's no way you can go. There's no direction in three-dimensional space to get beyond the black hole event horizon. Get back out. But The Firerock's paradox is that, information is conserved and you survive according to you, but you don't survive to somebody else, which is really bizarre in quantum mechanics. They're just going to see you fade away into this redshift and die. Basically, you're just going to fade away. To them, you're dead. You're heat up. You're going to burn up. But not to you, which is, again, really, really weird. Wouldn't the gravity crush us? No, because the graduation of the gravitational field is very, very small compared to that of a smaller black hole. The gradient, I should say, the gradient of the gravity on a black hole, small black hole, is really, really, really harsh. So as you go through that gradient, you're gonna have a higher pull on the head than you are the feet, and you're gonna spaghettified. But on a bigger black hole, that gradient is much smaller. So sure, there's a little bit more tugging at the base of your head, the head and your feet, but it's not significant enough to rip you apart. So you're not going to be crushed until you hit the singularity. Then you're going to be crushed, right? Because then you have all this gravity on you, and you got a solid object of the singularity, which is the mathematical point. But you're basically going to be crushed at that point. But going blast, you don't get crushed at the event horizon. You get crushed when you get near the singularity, right? You can be in a gravitational well and be in free fall, and you're just fine, right? But as soon as you get closer to that the planet, like, Jupiter, I can circle Jupiter, right? Jupiter's got a lot of gravity to it. I can be in that gravitational well and just fine. But as soon as I get closer to the planet, then I'm starting to feel the forces more, and I'm going to be crushed when I hit when I get really close to the surface. How would a bigger black hole make less crushing gravity? Because again, the gradient is over more of a longer period of space. And so on a smaller black hole, you have this much gradient and that much. So as soon as you start approaching the black hole, you're going to feel the effects quicker and they're going to change quicker. But in a larger black hole, you're going to feel it slower and notice less of a change until you approach more of the singularity. And even still, in a rotating black hole, it can form an inner and outer event horizon. And so in the first event horizon, space and time switch places. So the space-like journey becomes a time-like journey. The time-like journey becomes a space-like journey. And so you're moving through time, but not moving through space. And then when you hit the inner event horizon, it goes back to normal. And then you basically crushed by the singularity. But what happens is that one event horizon on a spinning charged black hole, I believe it's called a von Neumann black hole, the event horizons separate. It's just a function of mathematics and physics. But what if you're Leonard Susskind, you'll feel a headache even near a planet? Yeah, of course. I mean, as you approach the object, you're going to feel that gravity more and more, right? But when you're just near the event horizon, it's a small gradient. You're not going to feel it. But anyways, I mean, this has gone way longer than I expected. I want to keep it down to a half hour. It's now going in an hour, so I do got to call it a close. But I'm going to change the my graphic here because I noticed a misspelling. But let me know what you think. Hope you like this series on explaining the atheist to atheism and how to better become a better atheist when you're arguing these types of things with theists, or at least non-believers, because I'm doing it from a non-theist approach, right? Because I'm not an atheist, but I'm not a theist. People know this. But I like the fact that people are interested in this. I've gotten positive feedback on it, and people that haven't had any positive feedback have no idea what they're talking about sometimes. So we'll see. But let me know what you think, guys. Leave a comment, like, subscribe. Find me some theists to talk to. See, even Alexa's telling me it's time to go to bed. Thank you, Alexa. Alexa, thank you.
You're so welcome.
She loves me.
Kindness really gives me a charge.
She loves me.
Hope you had a good week.
I did. Good night.